My name is Eliza, and if you had asked me a year ago who I trusted most in the world, I would have answered without thinking, my father. He wasn't perfect. He could be stubborn, quiet, and sometimes impossible to read. But after my mom passed away when I was 16, it was always the two of us against the world. At least, that's what I believed. Then my older sister, Rachel, came back into our lives. She said she wanted to help Dad after his health started declining. She told everyone she was there because family mattered more than anything. She cooked his meals, drove him to appointments, organized his medications, and smiled the kind of smile that made people believe every word she said. I believed her too. I had no idea that every kind gesture was slowly turning into another brick in the wall she was building between my father and me. At first, the changes were so small I convinced myself I was imagining them. Dad stopped answering my calls as quickly. He canceled our weekly dinners. He forgot birthdays, conversations, even promises he'd made only days before. Whenever I asked what was wrong, Rachel always had the perfect explanation. Dad's just tired. He's overwhelmed. You're reading too much into it. But somehow, every conversation ended with me apologizing for things I didn't even understand. Then came the accusations. Dad suddenly believed I only visited because I wanted money. He claimed I'd been pressuring him to rewrite his will. He even accused me of stealing important documents from his office. I stood there completely speechless. Dad, what are you talking about? His face looked colder than I'd ever seen. I know exactly who you are now, Eliza. Those words hurt more than I can describe. I kept asking where he'd heard these things. He refused to answer. Rachel simply stood behind him with tears in her eyes, gently rubbing his shoulder like the devoted daughter trying to comfort a heartbroken father. She never had to defend herself. She didn't need to. She had already made sure Dad would defend her instead. The rest of the family quickly picked sides. My aunt stopped inviting me to holidays. My cousins quit replying to my messages. Even family friends I'd known since childhood started looking at me like I was some greedy daughter waiting for her father to die. No matter how much I tried to explain, no one wanted to listen. Because Rachel had gotten there first. Every lie she told sounded believable because she'd wrapped it inside just enough truth. If Dad forgot something, she blamed me. If he became confused, she claimed I was upsetting him. If he got angry, she said it was because I couldn't accept boundaries. Looking back now, I realize she wasn't destroying my reputation all at once. She was doing it one conversation at a time. One whispered comment. One fake concern. One carefully timed tear. Until nobody questioned her anymore. Including my father. I almost gave up. There comes a point when fighting for someone who no longer believes you starts feeling impossible. I told myself maybe Dad really didn't want me around. Maybe losing him while he was still alive would hurt less than begging for his love every single day. Then everything changed. Late one rainy Tuesday evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital. My stomach dropped. A nurse calmly explained that my father had collapsed at home and was being treated in the emergency department. Before I could ask another question, she said something that made my heart race. Your sister is already here. I drove faster than I ever should have. Every red light felt like an hour. Every mile filled my head with questions. Would Dad be okay? Would Rachel let me see him? Would he even want to see me? When I finally reached the hospital, Rachel met me outside his room before I could take another step. Her face was perfectly composed. Too composed. She folded her arms and looked at me with the same practiced disappointment I'd seen so many times before. You've done enough damage, she whispered. Don't make this harder for him. I wanted to push past her. I wanted to see my father. Instead, security politely asked me to wait outside because Rachel had told them family tensions might upset the patient. I couldn't believe it. She had managed to shut me out even here. Defeated, I sat alone in the waiting area, staring at strangers coming and going. Then I noticed something lying beneath the chair beside me. It looked ordinary. Just a plastic hospital bracelet. Most people would have walked right past it. But one name, one date, and one tiny handwritten note printed on that bracelet instantly proved that Rachel had been lying for months. And the moment I understood what I was holding, I realized my sister's entire story was about to fall apart. When I was growing up, people used to joke that my dad and I shared the same brain. If I was thinking about pancakes on a Saturday morning, he'd already have the batter mixed before I came downstairs. If he was fixing the old truck in the garage, I'd be sitting beside him with a flashlight before he even asked for help. My little shadow, he'd call me. My name is Eliza, and for most of my life, being my father's shadow was the one thing I was sure of. My mom passed away after a long battle with cancer when I was 16. Losing her changed everything. Dad buried himself in work to keep us afloat, and I tried to become the easiest daughter possible. I cooked dinner when he worked late, helped with the bills, and made sure the house still felt like a home. It wasn't perfect, but we got through those years together. My older sister, Rachel, had always been different. She was 5 years older than me and moved away as soon as she graduated college. She rarely called, skipped birthdays, and only came home when she needed something. Dad always excused her behavior. "She's just trying to find herself," he'd say. I didn't argue, even when it hurt. Part of me hoped that one day she'd decide she actually wanted to be part of this family. Years passed. I became a graphic designer, rented a small apartment 20 minutes away, and still visited Dad every Wednesday for dinner. It became our tradition. Every Wednesday meant homemade spaghetti, terrible action movies, and Dad pretending he could still beat me at cards. He never could. "You cheat," he'd laugh. "I'm just smarter," I'd tease. Those evenings became my favorite part of every week. Then Dad turned 72. The changes started slowly. He forgot where he'd left his glasses. He repeated stories he'd already told me. Once, he accidentally drove to our old house instead of the one he'd lived in for almost 15 years. The doctor called it mild memory problems. Nothing unusual for someone his age, but something we should keep an eye on. I offered to help. "I can come by more often," I told him. "You don't have to worry about me," he replied with a smile. "I'm still tougher than I look." He wanted his independence, so I respected it. A month later, Rachel suddenly called. I heard Dad's having health issues. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. "I think I should come home for a while." I was surprised but relieved. Maybe this was exactly what our family needed. When she arrived, she hugged Dad so tightly that he actually cried. "I should have come back sooner," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "I'm just happy you're here." For the first few weeks, everything seemed wonderful. Rachel cooked healthy meals. She organized his medications into labeled containers. She drove him to doctor's appointments whenever I had to work. She even thanked me for everything I'd done over the years. "You've carried this family long enough," she said one evening. "Let me help now." For the first time in years, I felt like I had my sister back. I trusted her. Looking back, that's the part that still embarrasses me. The warning signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Rachel insisted on handling every doctor's appointment by herself. "I'll explain everything to Eliza later," she'd tell Dad. When I asked how an appointment had gone, she'd give short answers. "Oh, nothing important." The doctor just repeated the same advice. It wasn't worth taking time off work. At first, I accepted those explanations. Then our Wednesday dinner started changing. "Dad's too tired tonight," Rachel would text. The following week. "His blood pressure is high. He needs to rest." Then. "He already ate." After nearly a month, I realized I hadn't seen my father in person once. That had never happened before. I drove to his house without calling. Rachel answered the door before I could knock twice. "Oh," she said, sounding almost disappointed. "You should have called. I wanted to surprise Dad. He's sleeping. I'll wait. He really needs his rest." I smiled politely. "I'll only say hello." Before she could stop me, I stepped inside. Dad was sitting in the living room watching television. Wide awake. He looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Eliza." I laughed awkwardly. "I thought you were asleep." He frowned. "Asleep? I've been watching this old western for an hour." Rachel appeared behind me so quickly it startled me. "I thought you said you were going to take a nap after lunch," she interrupted smoothly. Dad blinked. "Oh, maybe I did." The moment passed so quickly that I almost questioned my own memory. We chatted for 20 minutes before I left. As I walked to my car, something kept bothering me. Why had Rachel lied about something so small? When I glanced back toward the house, I saw her standing behind the living room curtains. She wasn't waving. She wasn't smiling. She was simply watching me drive away. And for the very first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that my own sister didn't just want to help my father. She wanted complete control over him. I had no proof. Only a feeling. But within days, that feeling would become something far more dangerous. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking everything. After all, Rachel had moved back to care for Dad. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was just being overprotective. It wasn't unusual for siblings to disagree when an aging parent started needing more help. That was the explanation I kept giving myself. Unfortunately, reality kept proving me wrong. The next Wednesday, I arrived at Dad's house carrying his favorite lemon pie. It was our tradition to share dessert after dinner while arguing over which old movie deserved the title of greatest of all time. Before I even reached the porch, Rachel stepped outside and closed the front door behind her. "Dad isn't feeling well," she said. "I'll just drop this off. He's already asleep." I glanced at my watch. It was barely 6 in the evening. "Since when does Dad go to bed before sunset?" She forced a laugh. "The medication makes him tired." Something about her answer felt rehearsed. "Can I at least say hello?" "I really don't think that's a good idea." For a few seconds, we simply stared at each other. Then I handed her the pie. "Tell him I stopped by." "I will." As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Rachel didn't take the pie inside. She carried it straight to the garbage bin beside the garage. My chest tightened. Dad would never know I'd been there. The following morning I called him. No answer. I tried again that afternoon. Straight to voicemail. When he finally returned my call that evening, he sounded strangely distant. "You haven't visited in weeks, Eliza." I nearly dropped my phone. "What are you talking about?" "I've come over 3 times." There was a long silence. "Rachel said you've been too busy." "I was standing at your front door yesterday." Another pause. "I don't remember." Before I could explain, Rachel's voice echoed faintly in the background. "Dad, your tea is getting cold." He hurried off the phone. "We'll talk later." But we never did. Over the next month, little things kept disappearing between us. Dad stopped texting first. He forgot our weekly dinners had ever existed. He even missed my birthday. When I gently reminded him a few days later, he looked genuinely confused. I thought Rachel said you were celebrating with friends. I spent my birthday alone. His eyes widened for a second. Then Rachel entered the room carrying coffee. See, she said with a sympathetic smile. This is exactly what the doctor warned us about. I frowned. What doctor? Dad gets overwhelmed when people argue with him. I wasn't arguing. She ignored me and turned to Dad. You should go sit down. He followed her without another word. It felt less like watching a father trust his daughter, and more like watching someone follow instructions. A week later, my Aunt Linda invited me to lunch. At least, that's what I thought. The moment I sat down, she folded her arms. Is it true? What? That you've been pressuring your father to sell the house? I stared at her. What? Rachel said you've been telling him assisted living would be easier. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've never said that. She hesitated. She also mentioned you've been asking about his savings. I laughed in disbelief. I've never even asked how much money Dad has. Aunt Linda studied my face. For the first time, doubt crossed her expression. You really didn't? No. She looked down at her coffee. Then why would Rachel say those things? I didn't have an answer. But someone clearly did. Rachel. That evening I drove straight to Dad's house. I wasn't leaving without speaking to him alone. Rachel answered the door again. You need to stop showing up unannounced. I need 5 minutes with my father. He's resting. I'll wait. She sighed dramatically before stepping aside. Dad was reading the newspaper in the living room. He smiled when he saw me. For one brief moment, everything felt normal again. Then Rachel spoke. Dad, remember what we discussed? His smile faded almost instantly. He folded the newspaper with shaky hands. Eliza. Yes. I think maybe you should visit less often. It felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. What? You get upset every time you're here. I don't. Rachel gently rubbed his shoulder. The stress isn't good for his memory. I looked directly at Dad. Is that what you really think? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I just want peace. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, Dad, when did I become someone who brings you anything but peace? He looked like he wanted to answer. His mouth opened. Then Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, smiled for the briefest moment, and slipped the phone back into her pocket without answering. It was almost as if she'd been expecting the interruption. She turned back to Dad. You should tell her the rest. He swallowed hard. There are other things. What things? His hands trembled. I've been told you've been asking people about my will. The room went completely silent. I stared at him, unable to process what I'd just heard. Someone wasn't simply driving us apart anymore. They were creating an entirely different version of me. And whoever was feeding my father those lies had just crossed a line that would change everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For a moment, I honestly wondered if I had walked into the wrong house. Dad, I said carefully, I've never asked anyone about your will. He kept staring at the floor. Rachel answered before he could. There's no point denying it anymore. I turned toward her. I'm talking to Dad. And I'm protecting him. The confidence in her voice made my stomach turn. She spoke as if she had already won. I knelt beside my father's chair. Please look at me. After several long seconds, he finally did. Have I ever asked you for money? No. Have I ever pressured you to sell the house? He hesitated. No. Rachel immediately interrupted. But you complained that maintaining the property was expensive. Remember, Dad? You said Eliza kept bringing it up. I never said that. I snapped. Dad flinched. Rachel wrapped an arm around his shoulders. See? This is exactly why his doctor said he shouldn't be under stress. I'm stressed because you're lying. She lowered her eyes, pretending to wipe away tears. I've been trying so hard to keep this family together. The performance was almost convincing. Almost. Dad stood up slowly. I think it's best if you leave. I froze. He had never asked me to leave his home before. Not once in my entire life. You want me to go? I need some quiet. I looked at him, hoping he'd change his mind. He didn't. I walked out without another word. The drive home felt endless. Every memory I had of my father replayed in my mind. Teaching me to ride a bicycle. Helping me with school projects. Holding my hand at Mom's funeral. How had we gone from that to this? The next morning things became even worse. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from cousins. Aunts. Even old family friends. Most of them weren't asking questions. They were making accusations. I can't believe you treat your father like this. Money changes people. You should be ashamed. Someone had been talking. I didn't need to guess who. By lunchtime, my cousin Megan called. Eliza, is it true you threatened to stop helping Dad unless he changed his will? I nearly laughed from disbelief. Where is everyone getting these stories? Rachel told us. What exactly did she say? There was an awkward silence. She said Dad has been crying because he feels like he's losing both his health and his youngest daughter. Those words hit harder than anything else. Not because they were true. Because I knew my father probably believed them. Over the following weeks, I became the family villain. Holiday invitations stopped. My birthday dinner with relatives was cancelled. Even neighbors I'd known for years began acting strangely. One afternoon I stopped by Dad's pharmacy to pick up vitamins I'd ordered for him. The pharmacist smiled politely. Oh. Rachel already collected everything. I frowned. I usually handle those. She mentioned you'd asked her to take over. I never said that. The pharmacist looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I assumed everything had been arranged. Everywhere I turned, Rachel had quietly replaced me. Not with loud arguments. With small conversations. Small lies. Small changes. Each one seemed harmless on its own. Together, they erased me from Dad's life. Then came the worst day of all. Dad invited the entire family to celebrate his birthday. Everyone was there. My aunts. Uncles. Cousins. Neighbors. People I hadn't seen in months. When I arrived carrying his favorite chocolate cake, conversations suddenly became quiet. Rachel walked over wearing the warmest smile imaginable. I'm glad you came. Something about her tone made me uneasy. Dad stood near the dining table opening gifts. I walked over. Happy birthday. He smiled politely. Thank you. Politely. Not warmly. Not like a father greeting his daughter. Like someone greeting a distant guest. I handed him the cake. Before he could take it, Rachel spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Did you really think bringing gifts would fix everything? The room fell silent. I stared at her. What are you talking about? She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. I didn't want to do this today. Then don't. But everyone deserves the truth. She opened the folder and removed several printed pages. I found these in Dad's office. She handed them to my aunt. Within seconds, people started passing them around. They were copies of online listings for assisted living facilities. There were handwritten notes in the margins. Circled prices. Highlighted sections. At the bottom of one page was my name. Or at least, what looked like my signature. My blood ran cold. I've never seen those before. Rachel sighed dramatically. Dad wanted to believe that too. People looked at me with disappointment. Some even shook their heads. I grabbed the papers. These aren't mine. Rachel folded her arms. So you're saying someone forged your signature? Yes. She gave a sad smile. That's a very serious accusation. I turned desperately toward Dad. Dad, please. You know me. His eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to believe anymore. Those words shattered me. For the first time in my life, my own father looked at me as though I were a stranger. I placed the papers back on the table. I didn't do this. Nobody answered. Not one person defended me. I quietly walked out of the house while conversations resumed behind me. As I reached my car, I realized something terrifying. Rachel wasn't making random accusations anymore. She was creating evidence. And if she was willing to forge my signature, there was no telling what she would do next. For days after Dad's birthday, I barely left my apartment. I replayed every conversation in my head, searching for the moment everything had fallen apart. Maybe I should have confronted Rachel sooner. Maybe I should have insisted on attending every doctor's appointment. Maybe I should have fought harder before everyone started believing her. But regret doesn't change the past. One thing became painfully clear. If I wanted my father back, I needed proof. Not opinions. Not arguments. Proof. I started by gathering everything I could. Old text messages. Photos from years of weekly dinners. Receipts showing the groceries I'd bought for Dad. Even birthday cards he'd written me over the years. None of it explained why he suddenly believed I wanted his money. Someone had been feeding him lies, and somehow those lies always sounded believable. Then something unexpected happened. My phone rang late on a Friday afternoon. The caller ID showed Dad's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Harper. She had lived next door for nearly 20 years and treated me like one of her own children. Eliza, she said quietly, I think you should know something. My heart started pounding. What is it? I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but yesterday I was watering my flowers when Rachel was outside talking on the phone. What did she say? Mrs. Harper hesitated. I heard her laugh and say, he believes every word now. Soon the house will be mine, and she'll never figure out how I did it. For a second, I couldn't speak. Are you sure? I wish I weren't. It was the first crack in Rachel's perfect image. Still, overheard words weren't enough. She could deny them. I needed something undeniable. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The hospital called again. Dad had been admitted overnight for observation after another dizzy spell. This time I arrived before Rachel. The nurse recognized my name and allowed me into his room. Dad was asleep. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Fragile. It broke my heart. I quietly pulled a chair beside his bed and held his hand. I miss you, I whispered. His fingers moved slightly, but he didn't wake. A nurse entered to check his chart. She smiled politely. You must be Eliza. I nodded. I've heard your name. Something about the way she said it caught my attention. You have. She looked surprised. I assumed you were the daughter who usually comes with him. No. Really? She frowned while checking the monitor. I could have sworn your sister introduced herself as you several times. I sat upright. What? The nurse looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm mistaken. No, please. She lowered her voice. During his last few visits, your sister signed some paperwork using your first name. I remember because I asked if she preferred Liz or Eliza, and she laughed. The room suddenly felt cold. Are you certain? I'm almost positive. Before I could ask another question, another nurse called her into the hallway. My mind was racing. Why would Rachel pretend to be me? What paperwork had she signed? Was she hiding medical information? Changing emergency contacts? Making decisions Dad thought I was making? Questions flooded my head faster than I could process them. Then I remembered the hospital bracelet I'd picked up in the waiting room days earlier. I'd slipped it into my purse without thinking much about it afterward. With shaking hands, I pulled it out. This time I looked at every detail. The patient's name wasn't my father's. It belonged to another elderly man. But clipped to the bracelet was a tiny barcode sticker with handwritten initials and a room transfer note. The initials matched Rachel's. More importantly, the transfer date matched the exact day she claimed she'd spent the entire afternoon at home caring for Dad. She hadn't been home. She'd been at the hospital. Using my name. Suddenly everything started making sense. I hurried to the records desk and politely asked whether I could verify something about Dad's previous admissions. The receptionist couldn't release confidential medical information, but after confirming my identity, she frowned at the computer screen. That's strange. What is? It says there was confusion about the family representative during one of the admissions. She couldn't tell me more, but she didn't have to. There had been confusion because Rachel had created it. I walked back toward Dad's room, my pulse pounding. Rachel was already there. She smiled the moment she saw me. Then her eyes dropped to the bracelet in my hand. The color drained from her face. For the first time in months. She looked afraid. Not nervous. Not irritated. Afraid. She took one slow step toward me. Where did you get that? I looked directly into her eyes. I think you already know. Her confident smile disappeared. And in that single moment, I realized the hospital bracelet wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was the first piece of evidence that could unravel every lie she'd told, and expose a secret she had desperately tried to keep buried. Rachel didn't answer my question. She just kept staring at the bracelet in my hand as though it had suddenly become the most dangerous object in the world. Then, almost instantly, her expression changed. The fear disappeared. The confident smile returned. You've always loved making up stories, Eliza. I held the bracelet up. So explain why this scares you. It doesn't. Then tell me why you've been signing hospital paperwork using my name. Her eyes narrowed. I have no idea what you're talking about. Before I could respond, Dad's doctor walked into the room. Rachel's personality shifted again. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes filled with tears. She took Dad's hand and spoke in a trembling voice. Doctor, my sister has been under so much stress lately. She's convinced everyone is against her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't defending herself. She was making me look unstable. The doctor glanced between us. I think today should stay calm for your father's sake. Rachel nodded sympathetically. I completely agree. It was unbelievable how naturally she played the caring daughter. I realized arguing in front of Dad would only help her. So I left without another word. But this time I wasn't walking away defeated. I was walking away with questions that finally had answers waiting somewhere. The next morning I requested copies of every message and email I'd ever exchanged with Dad over the previous 2 years. As I sorted through them, a strange pattern appeared. Whenever Dad sent me warm, thoughtful messages, they stopped abruptly after Rachel moved in. Instead, his texts became unusually short. Some didn't even sound like him. One message read, "Please don't visit unless you call Rachel first." Dad had never referred to his own home that way. Another simply said, "I'm disappointed in your recent behavior." No explanation. No emotion. Just words that felt copied from someone else's mouth. Then I noticed something else. The timestamps. Several messages had been sent while Dad was supposedly asleep or attending medical appointments. I called the phone company to ask about account activity. They couldn't reveal much over the phone, but they confirmed that another device had recently been linked to Dad's account. Another device. Another person with access. Rachel. It wasn't proof by itself, but it fit perfectly with everything else. Later that week, Mrs. Harper knocked on my apartment door. I found something while trimming the bushes between our yards. She handed me a small notebook. "It's your father's." I recognized the worn leather cover immediately. Dad carried that notebook everywhere. He used it for grocery lists, reminders, and little notes he'd write to himself whenever he worried he'd forget something. My hands trembled as I opened it. Most pages looked normal. Then halfway through, the handwriting changed. Instead of reminders, there were confused questions. Did Eliza really ask for money? Rachel says Eliza canceled dinner. I don't remember. Need to ask Eliza if she's angry with me. The entries grew more heartbreaking with every page. I keep forgetting conversations. I don't know who is telling me the truth. Then one sentence made tears fill my eyes. If I ever stop trusting Eliza, someone should tell me why, because she has never given me a reason not to. I had to sit down. Despite everything Rachel had done, a part of Dad had still been fighting to hold on to the truth. He had doubted the stories. He just hadn't known who to believe. At the back of the notebook, folded inside the cover, was a receipt from a print shop. The date matched the week before Dad's birthday party. The same week those fake assisted living documents had appeared. An idea suddenly hit me. I drove straight to the print shop. The manager searched their computer records. "I'm sorry," he said. "We don't keep the documents themselves forever." My heart sank. Then he added, "But we do keep payment information." He turned the monitor toward me. The order had been paid with a credit card. Not Dad's. Rachel's. I felt my pulse racing. She had paid to print the very documents she later claimed to have found in Dad's office. The manager couldn't give me a copy without a legal request, but he confirmed the transaction existed. For the first time, I wasn't chasing suspicions anymore. The pieces were fitting together. Rachel had isolated Dad. She had spoken for him at medical appointments. She had gained access to his phone. She had spread lies to the family. She had created fake evidence. And now I knew she had paid for it. That evening my phone rang. It was Aunt Linda. Her voice sounded different. Quieter. "I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything." She continued. "I visited your father today while Rachel went shopping." "What happened?" "He asked me why you hadn't come to see him in months." I closed my eyes. "I've been trying." He looked genuinely shocked. Aunt Linda's voice cracked. "He said Rachel told him you didn't want anything to do with him anymore." Tears rolled down my face. For months, Rachel had been telling me Dad didn't want to see me. At the very same time, she had been telling Dad that I had abandoned him. Neither of us had walked away. She had simply stood between us. Aunt Linda took a deep breath. "I think it's time the whole family hears the truth." I looked at the notebook on my table. The bracelet beside it. The growing list of evidence. For months, Rachel had controlled every conversation. But now, for the first time, she wasn't the only one with a story to tell. Aunt Linda didn't waste any time. Within 3 days, she called every close relative and asked them to come to Dad's house the following Sunday. She didn't explain why. She only said it was important. Rachel, of course, assumed it was another family gathering she could control. When I pulled into Dad's driveway that afternoon, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for a minute before getting out. I wasn't afraid of Rachel anymore. I was afraid of one thing. That my father would look me in the eyes and still choose to believe her. The living room was already full. My uncles sat quietly near the fireplace. My cousins whispered to one another. Mrs. Harper stood beside Aunt Linda. Even Dad's family doctor had agreed to stop by after Aunt Linda explained that there had been serious concerns about misinformation surrounding his care. Rachel greeted everyone with her usual warm smile. Then she saw me. Her smile faded for just a second before returning. "I didn't realize you were invited." Aunt Linda answered before I could. "I invited her." Rachel looked around the room. "What's going on?" Dad slowly walked into the living room, leaning on his cane. He looked tired, but his eyes softened when he saw me. Not with complete trust, but with something I hadn't seen in months. Uncertainty. Maybe even hope. Aunt Linda stood. "We're here because this family has spent months believing accusations without asking enough questions." Rachel crossed her arms. "If this is about Eliza again, Dad doesn't need more stress." "No," Aunt Linda replied firmly. "It's about the truth." The room became silent. I placed the hospital bracelet on the coffee table. Rachel glanced at it but didn't speak. Next, I laid down Dad's notebook. Then copies of text messages. Then photographs of our weekly dinners before she moved back. Finally, I placed a written timeline showing every lie Rachel had told both Dad and me. Rachel laughed. "This proves nothing." I looked directly at her. "Then let's go through it together." I picked up the notebook. Dad wrote this himself. He adjusted his glasses as I read aloud. "If I ever stop trusting Eliza, someone should tell me why, because she has never given me a reason not to." Dad's face slowly changed. "I remember writing that." Rachel stepped forward. He was confused. Mrs. Harper immediately spoke up. "No." Everyone turned toward her. "I heard you outside my house telling someone. He believes every word now. Soon the house will be mine." Rachel stared at her. "You misunderstood. I know exactly what I heard." Before Rachel could recover, Aunt Linda held up another document. "The print shop confirmed the fake assisted living papers were paid for using your credit card." Rachel's confident expression disappeared. "That's impossible." "You can deny it," Aunt Linda replied, "but the payment record exists." Rachel looked toward Dad. "They're twisting everything." I took a slow breath. "No, Rachel." I held up my phone. "The phone company confirmed another device was connected to Dad's account after you moved in." She didn't answer. "You told Dad I stopped visiting." I looked at my father. "Did she tell you that?" He nodded slowly. "She said, you were too busy." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "She told me you didn't want to see me anymore." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "I never said that." "I know." The room was completely silent now. Even my cousins looked stunned. Then Dad spoke again. "Rachel." She immediately walked toward him. "Dad, don't listen to them." He raised his hand, stopping her. "Answer one question." She forced a smile. "Anything." Did you tell Eliza I didn't want her here? Rachel hesitated. It was for your health. His voice became firmer. Did you tell me she abandoned me? Another silence. Answer me. She looked around the room as though searching for someone to rescue her. No one did. Finally, she whispered. Yes. The word echoed through the room. Dad closed his eyes. Why? Rachel's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. Her voice rose. She already had everything. Everyone stared at her. You loved her more after Mom died. Tears streamed down her face. I spent my whole life feeling invisible. She pointed at me. You were always the perfect daughter. I shook my head. That wasn't my fault. You had him. She almost screamed. And I had no one. Dad looked heartbroken. So you decided to take her away from me? Rachel couldn't answer. She simply cried. For months she'd convinced everyone she was protecting our father. Now the truth stood exposed. She hadn't been protecting him. She had been punishing both of us for wounds she'd carried for years. Dad slowly stood, leaning heavily on his cane. I lost months with my daughter. His voice trembled. Months I'll never get back. Rachel reached for his hand. He stepped back. I don't recognize the person you've become. Those words broke something inside her. She lowered her head and quietly walked toward the front door. No one tried to stop her. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Dad turned toward me. His eyes overflowed with tears. So many things were stolen from us. I nodded. Not anymore. But before we could begin repairing our family, there was one final conversation my father and I still needed to have. And it would become the most emotional moment of both our lives. After everyone left, the house felt strangely quiet. For months it had been filled with tension, whispered conversations, and constant uncertainty. Now there was only silence. Dad sat in his favorite armchair staring at the family photographs on the fireplace. The same photographs Rachel had dusted every morning while quietly tearing our family apart. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Another part of me just wanted my father back. Finally, he spoke. I owe you an apology. I looked at him. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice cracked. I believe things about you that no father should ever believe without asking his daughter first. Tears filled my eyes. I should have fought harder too. He slowly shook his head. No. He reached for the leather notebook lying on the coffee table. I knew something wasn't right. He opened it to the page I'd read aloud earlier. I kept writing these little reminders because I was afraid my memory would betray me. He smiled sadly. I never imagined someone else would betray me first. I sat beside him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he took my hand, just like he had when I was a little girl crossing busy streets. I was so scared, Eliza. Of what? Of forgetting your mother. His words caught me completely off guard. When the doctor first told me my memory was changing, all I could think about was losing her all over again. He looked toward Mom's framed photograph. Rachel promised she'd help me remember things. His shoulders slumped. I didn't realize she was choosing which memories I kept. That sentence broke my heart more than anything else. He hadn't simply believed lies. He had depended on someone he trusted to fill in the gaps his fading memory left behind. And Rachel had used those gaps as weapons. Over the following weeks, Dad began working with his doctor and a counselor who specialized in memory-related illnesses. They also recommended a family advocate to help him make future financial and medical decisions with transparency, so no one person would have complete control again. This time, every important meeting included both of us. No more secrets. No more private conversations. No more opportunities for manipulation. Little by little, life started feeling familiar again. Wednesday dinners returned. Dad insisted on making spaghetti himself, even though he still burned the garlic almost every time. "I taught you how to cook," he'd say proudly. And somehow I still became the better chef, I'd tease. He'd laugh the way he used to. Real laughter. Not the forced smiles I'd seen for months. Our family slowly healed too. Aunt Linda apologized again, this time with tears in her eyes. I should have asked questions instead of believing gossip. "I understand," I told her. "You don't have to forgive us so quickly." I already have. Holding on to anger would have only given Rachel's lies more power. One by one, my cousins reached out. Some admitted they had doubted Rachel's stories but stayed silent because they didn't want conflict. Others confessed they simply found it easier to believe the loudest voice in the room. That realization stayed with me. The truth doesn't always lose because it's weak. Sometimes it loses because good people stay quiet. As for Rachel, she moved out before Dad was discharged from the hospital. For months, none of us heard from her. Then one afternoon a letter arrived. There was no return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I spent so many years believing Dad loved you more that I stopped caring how much pain I caused. By the time I realized what I'd become, I didn't know how to stop lying. I'm sorry for what I stole from both of you." Dad read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside a drawer. "Do you forgive her?" I asked. He thought for a long time. "I hope she changes." "That's not what I asked." He sighed. "Forgiveness isn't the same as trust." I nodded. He was right. Some broken things can be repaired. Others leave scars that remind you to be more careful. Months later, Dad invited me over for dinner again. After we finished eating, he walked into the garage and returned carrying a dusty wooden box. "I've been saving this." Inside were dozens of old photographs. Me riding my first bicycle. Mom laughing in the backyard. Rachel and I building a snowman together when we were children. Dad smiled softly. "No one gets to rewrite our family story ever again." We spent hours looking through those pictures, telling stories, laughing at terrible haircuts, and remembering the people we had been before grief, jealousy, and manipulation found their way into our lives. As I drove home that night, I realized something important. The hospital bracelet hadn't saved my family. It had only revealed the truth. What saved us was finally refusing to ignore the questions we were too afraid to ask. Trust is precious. It should never be given blindly, and it should never be taken for granted. If someone truly loves you, they won't isolate you from the people who care about you. They won't ask you to choose between relationships. They won't build their happiness on someone else's pain. Sometimes the smallest piece of evidence can expose the biggest lie. And sometimes the hardest fight isn't proving you're innocent. It's holding on to your integrity long enough for the truth to catch up. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments.